since 1991. Birds and people are living together in seemingly perfect harmony, until one day a young man catches fire. This is Phoenix.
Good morning, everybody. My name is 12 Gauge. Welcome to my channel. I am your host, and this is 12 Gauge Investigative. This morning I decided to hop on here and just have a chat with y'all. Not really with any intention in mind, but just to talk, just to be able to clear the old noggin. This kind of reminds me of the past whenever you'd have the stillness of the morning or the stillness of the night, and there wouldn't be anybody up, and you'd have total control over your speech, your understanding of the cases, without debating, without defending, without condemning. I stayed up a little late watching the fight last night, kind of like probably half the world. I don't know how I feel about the fight, but I guess I was expecting 20-year-old Mike to bust out there somewhere and put it all together one more time and take out the younger guy. I really don't feel that Jake Paul won. He may have won by decision, but seeing Mike having issues moving around the ring as he did, I kind of knew that it wasn't going to be that type of fight like it used to be. Now, if Jake Paul fights Mike's son, then that'll be a fight. So I don't know. That would be a heck of a boxing card right there. There's a lot going on in the criminal justice arena. We have the individual from Georgia who brutally attacked and killed Lincoln Riley. And it's really sad that some people can't even go for a jog without somebody lurking, waiting to harm them. You know, I don't hear not a peep on YouTube about his presumption of innocence. Not a peep. There's nothing being said about his presumption of innocence by anyone. And I guess people just take and choose their stance on certain things. And it's very tragic. Very tragic. I'm gonna go ahead and play you a video to kind of update, let you know what I'm talking about. Because just like everything else, some of these cases go unnoticed. They don't really have the opportunity to be heard because it's all about one case and one case only. And isn't that sad that that one case puts so much emphasis above justice in potentially other cases? So let's watch this a little bit.
But I want to talk to you about something that happened before, and it is count 10 of the indictment, and it is a peeping Tom. Shortly before 7 a.m., Jose Ibarra is seen on a trail cam, and this is a version of the trail cam, or this is the angle you'll see. And you'll see an individual, and the state will be the first to tell you this video quality is not fantastic. But there's more than just this video. You'll see an individual wearing a dark hoodie, eventually a dark hat, black gloves, and holding a styrofoam cup. And UGA attempted to enhance this video. GBI Cyber attempted to enhance this video. This is about as good as it gets. You can see a bag. They've studied this video 1,000 times. You'll hear the things that they saw in looking at these videos. The male is seen on the trail cam exiting the defendant's apartment complex. That's how he gets onto the trail. It's further beyond outside the scope of this exact clip. But he gets on through a path from the defendant's apartment complex to this trail that leads onto campus. And this is Rogers Road. This is UGA Village housing for graduate students. And this is a bus stop that's used by students to take the bus to get to class. At 7:01 a.m., this individual is seen at this door. You're going to see in the bottom or the middle of your screen. That's apartment 114. And in that apartment, 114, building S, lives a graduate student. She's an Indian national. Her name is Tejaswi Sarathi, and she is here at the University of Georgia studying. This defendant is seen trying to open her door at 7 o'clock in the morning. And there's about an hour's worth of video that was watched by UGA PD that between 7:01 a.m. and 7:57 a.m.
Okay, so he went to the front door of that apartment 6 times. He's seen on camera trying to open the door twice. But let's not focus on the fact that he's trying to commit a crime. Let's not focus on the fact that this man is obviously not wanting to be seen due to concealing himself in all black. Let's not focus on the fact that, he isn't a student and he has really no real reason to be at that apartment complex. Granted, it's a free country. But honestly, what other reason does he have to be at that apartment complex but to do harm? But as I'm talking, you'll have other people discussing, well, it's his right to open the door. It's his right to be looking around. It's his right to do this. It's his right. Okay, so your perspective on life is it's your right to do anything you want. And if you get caught, if your excuse is good enough, then you should be set free. Then why have laws? Why have guidelines? Why have anything to govern our country if that's your view on things? Because most people will challenge that. They will challenge you with, they don't believe this, they don't believe that, it doesn't make sense. Usually it doesn't make sense because they can't comprehend the fact that criminals are not necessarily nice people. I've heard it in another case that one of the accused individuals doesn't appear to be a murderer's type. Well, neither did Ted Bundy. Neither did Richard Ramirez. Neither did the guy in Minnesota, Jeffrey Dahmer.
On the 22nd day of February 2024, about 70 minutes before Laken Riley is murdered, this defendant goes to the door of apartment 114 6 times. Twice they can see on video that he attempts to open her door. And at one point, you'll see in the video where he ducks down. And that is because at some point, the student inside heard him at her door, and she approaches him at the door and says, "Excuse me." And she will testify to this court that when she said that, she's looking at her peephole, he ducks down. And you can actually see that on the video. And just here's a portion of her 911 call where she calls at 7:57.
And what's going on? I was in the shower and then I went to the market and I came to check that someone was probably the big hole. Someone was trying to open the door. And then I said, "Excuse me," and then they just ran away. And then now they kept trying to look through my window. Okay, and what's going on?
So she says she was in the shower and she heard her door jiggling. And she said that somebody was at her door. She says, "Excuse me," he ducks down and he tries to look through her back window and does look through her back window. This is her back window. This is the backside of Building S, and this is exactly how it was that morning. This is body cam footage of Officer Bridges, who's one of the officers that responded. Her blinds are open wide. They're open, not only open, but they're pulled up more than halfway. The right side is her.
Another thing I've heard is there's a lot of victim shaming. In the Idaho 4 case, it's been stated multiple times by multiple creators that they should have had their blinds drawn. If they didn't want people looking at them, they should have had curtains. They should have had certain things. Well, if you're one of those people that is pushing for free speech and rights and all this other stuff, you contradict yourself, because therefore you're saying that the victim is at fault because they chose not to have any curtains, not to have their blinds drawn. At my condo, it was upstairs. It was and I had windows all over the place. Very seldom did I ever have my blinds drawn. My windows were open pretty much 24, or, they were not drawn. The blinds weren't drawn. So they were open pretty much 24/7. So to say that if anything would have happened, it would have been my fault because I invited somebody in to do something to me. Kind of like in the Idaho 4 case, they said, well, the way the girls dressed or the TikToks that they made them more susceptible to predatory individuals that were looking to hurt somebody. That's almost like saying that if you're wearing workout clothes, kind of like Laken, her name was Laken. I said Lincoln. Her name was Laken Riley. If you were wearing workout clothes like Laken was that morning, that didn't excuse anybody to hurt her because she was trying to be comfortable and go work out and be fit. That's it. I'm so sick and tired of excuses. Let's make an excuse to make the accountability go away. Let's make it the victim's fault. Let's make it the family's fault. Let's make it the manufacturer's fault. Let's make it this and that fault instead of making it this person right here's fault.
Footage of Officer Bridges, who's one of the officers that responded. Her blinds are open wide. They're open, not only open, but they're pulled up more than halfway. The right side is her living room. The left side window is her bedroom, wide open. Her blinds were that morning. She said that's how she kept it because it was kind of a dark place, and it was more comfortable for her to have some light in. And that's how her windows were. And she said when she turned around, she could see the person who she can't identify. We'll be the first to tell you she can't identify him. She didn't get a good look at his face. He had that hat over his face. He had a hood on. She describes the clothing, dark hat, dark jacket. Didn't get a look at his face because when she went through the peephole, he ducked down, but she could see him peeping into her window, looking into her window.
Turning our attention now to Athens, Georgia, for the pretrial hearing in the murder of Laken Riley case. A judge is hearing arguments today on the possible exclusion of DNA evidence against the defendant, Jose Ibarra. He is accused of killing nursing student Laken Riley on the campus of the University of Georgia back in February of just this year. Before we go back into court, I want to bring in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas, who's on the ground today, covering today's action. Cody, always great to be on with you. Tell us, what is the latest in that courtroom today?
Good afternoon to Judge Ashley. The first motion argued in court today was a motion to suppress cell phone data acquired from Jose Ibarra's 2 cell phones. Now, the police, once they detained Ibarra, took 2 cell phones from his house. The defense says that The defense says that his phones were taken by police. Investigators attempted to search one of the phones without having a warrant, but the prosecution says that police searched those phones after an official warrant was obtained. Listen to some of those arguments, testimony, and the defense's response today on the stand.
With 1B7 being locked, could you have searched the phone without Cellubrite Premium?
No,
Why not?
I couldn't get into the device without having some tool to guess the pattern lock to unlock the device. So there was no way to get into the specimen without using Celebrate Premium. There are other tools on the market, such as Gray Key, but we did not have an Android license.
It means someone searched the phone. Is that right?
Correct.
Am I still here? Can y'all hear me? Hello? You know, because in another case, they just set out motions of suppression in that case. So It's good to understand what the motion of suppression is. That's weird. Maybe the video's bad. Let me go to another video. Well, I have it paused. Let me know if you hear it now.
About 1B7, no one could have searched it because it was locked.
The phones were not kept safe, number one. They were tampered with, number two. Agent Karate said that he tried to access the phone. He was caught in the act by the third eye intruder. It may be that he was only trying to put it in airplane mode, but the point of the matter is, without a warrant, they tried to enter Mr. Ibarra's phone. That is exactly what our case law prohibits them doing.
Now, Judge Ashley, the judge did not make a ruling on that motion to suppress that cell phone data. And actually, this hearing did just wrap up a few minutes ago. They argued for a little bit over some litigation about that crucial DNA evidence, the fingerprint found from Jose Ibarra on Laken Riley's cell phone and the DNA evidence found under Laken Riley's fingernails. The judge also did not make a ruling on whether that will be excluded. The defense had filed a motion to exclude that DNA evidence from the trial, but no decisions were officially made today in court.
Thank you so much to you, Cody, because this is all very important information. It determines what they actually use in court to prove he did it according to the state. All right, thank you again. We want to get back into court now to bring you some of the arguments. The attorneys at this point are arguing over the cell phone evidence.
Anything else in the way of evidence?
Not in the way of evidence from the state.
Nothing else from the defense, Your Honor.
Y'all want to go later this now?
Yes, please.
If we can, Your Honor. Who would you like to proceed first, Your Honor?
This was the state's original motion. They go, you go,
Yes, sir.
they go.
Well, yes, sir. This evidence that we presented today is in response to the defendant's amended motion to suppress, which was filed after our last hearing. And in that motion to suppress, the defense alleges that they had evidence that would contradict that the phone was not searched or that the phone was searched prior to the warrant. So let me say that the other way around. I apologize. The state's position is, and the evidence has shown, that while 1B7 and 1B8 were seized without a warrant, which we have already covered the last hearing, and I don't wish to cover unless the court wishes me to recover that.
I do not.
Okay, thank you. That those phones were not searched until a search warrant was obtained. And in fact, you've now heard, and you knew from last time, there were 2 search warrants, 3 total, but for each phone, two warrants for the phones. We are here today because the defense filed the amended motion saying that they had evidence that that's not true. And I think the evidence has been really clear in the hearing today that what happened to 1B7 is that Special Agent Karate tried to put it in airplane mode, couldn't. The phone was locked. He couldn't unlock it. He didn't search it. It was left with the GBI. Eventually, it made its way to UGA PD, where Agent Hipkiss picked it up, not in airplane mode, and in a Faraday bag. And then it had to be physically broken into by Cellubrite Premium. There's no way it is even possible. Evidence is controverted at this point that agents, law enforcement officers, or anyone could search that phone prior to Judge Stevens signing that warrant on February 27th. It's clear from even the own Cellubrite reports that the defense made and put into evidence. Candace Hunter at the FBI was the only person who could open that phone, and she did so only after receiving that warrant from Judge Stevens in the manner in which has been described to you. I hear this complaint coming that they exceeded the scope of the warrant. Well, let me tell you who exceeded the scope of the warrant. The defense did. The first time Special Agent Hipkiss even saw data that predated what Judge Stevens allowed him to take is when the defense created those exhibits and gave it to him. He testified to this court, and you will, I'm sure, in camera review his seizure report. And his seizure report was set at the parameters in which Judge Stevens authorized him to search. And he was permitted to look at items which had no date on it to determine whether in fact they fell within the scope of the warrant. And if they did not fall within the scope of the warrant, he didn't tag them. If they did fall within the scope of the warrant, he tagged them. And tagging them really is just their way of saying he seized them.
And for those of you that are watching that really don't understand the court process as far as the purpose of opening arguments and closing arguments and things like that, you know, throughout the trial, there's going to be evidence shown that these are more often than not the evidence that's going to tie the individual to the crime that he's being committed of or accused of. I'm sorry. Still kind of early. Anyway, so the basis of the defense and the prosecution trying to discredit each other is normal. It's normal banter. Because you're trying to show the jury that there is a possibility that something happened that could have violated your client's rights. And this is going to happen in the other case that everybody's awaiting.
And they are in those reports that have been admitted to you as State's Exhibit 31. From the plain language of Judge Stevens' warrant, he allowed the FBI to download the entire phone. Not only does it make logical sense that that's the only way they could do it. So it would be like saying, as the defense to tell this court, and I'd like to see some legal authority on it, that you can search the phone, but we're just not going to allow you to download it. Well, then you're back to what Special Agent Hipkiss said. Well, we're just going to have to physically go through the phone. And if you do that, then you're absolutely looking at everything in the phone. There is a tapestry of cases out there, and I'm happy to provide them to the court about this theory. And it's not a new theory. And I would say that defense's argument is rather novel. There's definitely no evidence that somebody got into that phone before it was cracked. So that's no evidence to support that allegation. But what they're trying to tell this court is that, well, you're going to have to search the phone without unlocking it. There are cases out there when it comes to computer searches. And in Riley v. California, when we first started this cell phone journey a long time ago with the United States Supreme Court, they likened, and Judge Roberts likened cell phones to microcomputers. And with searching computers, and I think all the case law associated with the search of computers is very helpful here. And I guess my argument is two things. One, they didn't exceed the scope. Judge Stevens authorized exactly what happened here, and they processed the warrant in the way that he authorized it. And number two, if they think that the scope succeeded, we're not using anything that's not in Special Agent Hipkiss's reports, so it's moot, and there's no harm. And three, and finally, they're asking you to establish some kind of procedure where you're allowed to search a file cabinet for the tax returns from 2020, but you can't look at all of the other items in the file to see if they are in fact the tax return from 2020. I mean, if you want to just relate it to other objects or relate it to computers. And so for computers, and I have a few cases to cite for the court, and I can provide them in writing as well if the court wants a brief on it. But quite frankly, United States versus Kahani, Khani, at 502 Fed 3rd.
So I'm going to show you the opening arguments of this case to show you just how these things happen. Because many people discuss the court process with little to no information to base it on. I have a whole bunch of downloads going on. I don't know. Good morning, everybody who's watching, who's in the chat, and who's not in the chat. Thank you for being here. If you get an opportunity, please hit the like button. Really appreciate it.
On February 22nd, Jose Ibarra put on a black hat, a hoodie style jacket, and some black kitchen style disposable gloves. And he went hunting for females on the University of Georgia's campus. And in his hunt, he encountered 22-year-old Laken Riley on her morning jog. And when Laken Riley refused to be his rape victim, he bashed her skull in with a rock repeatedly. That is what this case is all about. The evidence will show that Laken fought. She fought for her life. She fought for her dignity. And in that fight, she caused this defendant to leave forensic evidence behind. She also marked her killer for the entire world to see. The forensic evidence that he left behind in this fight is his DNA, and only his DNA and Laken's, underneath Laken's right fingernails. He also left behind in a struggle with her over her phone, because the court will hear that she called 911. He left behind his left thumbprint on her iPhone, which was found not far from her body at the crime scene. And it is that forensic evidence alone that would give you enough evidence to find him guilty as charged on the counts in this indictment. But the evidence in this case will come in basically forms. There'll be forensic evidence, there will be digital evidence, and there will be video evidence. And all three forms of those evidence will point to one person, Jose Ibarra, as the killer of Laken Riley. And this is not working. We'll start with the timeline, and the timeline is established by a lot of the digital evidence that you're going to hear about. And for Laken, that timeline begins basically at 9:03 in the morning. At 9:03 on Thursday, February 22nd, Laken Riley did something that she does all the time, and she went out for a morning jog. She lives not far from the crime scene, and Your Honor is going to see several maps in this case, and you will see that where Laken Riley lived, where the defendant lived, where our other victim who you're going to hear from in this trial, Tasia Swee, lived.
So there's Laken right there, heading out for a jog. The way some of the other YouTube community portrays the innocence of such individuals, they would state that Laken was inviting this due to the way that she was wearing her clothing, due to the fact that she was a young, fit female, that she was inviting this monster to attack her. And there's no way that individual sitting on that stand could have done this, because he's innocent. They also leave out the word presumed many times over. We all know they're presumed innocent until found guilty. We're not stupid. But that's the biggest fight they have when they come into chat rooms and they make their own videos and all this other stuff. This young girl lost her life on a running trail. Young people are being killed by the masses. You can't even go for a run on a trail that you probably ran 100 times without fearing that somebody feels like they have the right to harm you and possibly kill you and take your cell phone. There's been a shift in the mindset of Americans towards criminality, and it hasn't been a positive one all the way around.
Building S at the University of Georgia Student Housing. And where items of evidence were dumped in this case and where Laken was murdered, it's all clustered together. And it's all clustered together within about a half-mile radius of one another. And you'll see several maps throughout this case. But she left her house at 9:03 in the morning. We know that for several reasons. She was captured on her Ring doorbell. And you'll see that video through our first witness. And she also was captured on a trail cam that becomes very important in this case. And at about 9:05 a.m., she's captured running from her house down Rogers Road, eventually towards the crime scene where she encounters this defendant. She is running, as you will see, with a few things that are important. 2 AirPods, and they are noise-canceling AirPods. And her phone, her iPhone, is in her left hand. She's wearing typical running clothes, and you're going to hear a little bit about how she runs, what she runs with, because these things are important to judge what eventually happened between her and this defendant on the trail. She wears typically very tight running clothes because that's what's comfortable when you run, so it doesn't get it doesn't come off or get loose when you're running. And so this particular day, she's wearing running tights, white Hoka shoes, and 3 layers of clothing on her top. She's wearing a running bra, a shirt, and a tight black Lululemon jacket when she leaves her house. At 9:11 a.m. exactly, Laken is a few minutes into her run, and we have some digital data which we'll talk to you about, which is a Garmin watch that Laken had gotten for Christmas that she's wearing on her run. And this watch captured a lot of important data that you're going to hear about. But she is on her run, and her phone, she activates the emergency function of her iPhone, and you're going to hear about that through testimony of the witness who examined her phone. She activates the emergency function of her iPhone, and she attempts to call 911, and she, in fact, does call 911. Her call is connected to ACC PD. At 9:12, you'll hear that the call was hung up, and I'm going to play the call for you. At 9:12, the call was hung up by the caller, not the 911 center. The 911 center did not hang up on Laken Riley. The phone hung up. And at 9:12, they tried to call her back, and there was no answer. This is an enhanced version of the 911 call, and there will be several stipulations between the parties in this case. We will execute a waiver of them as they come in. One of the stipulations was that this 911 call was sent to the FBI in Quantico, where they attempted to enhance the call. And this is a 1 minute and 8 second call, and this is the enhanced version of that call. And I'd like the court, when listening to the call, right about 55 seconds into the call, you're going to hear a voice.
Clark County 911. Hello, this is Clark County 911. Hello, Clark County 911. Can anyone hear me? Clark County 911.
Yo Tango. There is a long break in what happens next. It was Laken's mom, who Laken usually talks to on her run, who started calling Laken at around 9:06 that morning. And you'll just see the call logs from that and the evidence of that through Laken's phone. And when she could not reach Laken, she began calling Laken's 3 roommates.
What a strong opening statement this prosecutor is giving, huh? Talking about how Jose Ibarra allegedly went hunting for females that day. And that's when he came across Laken Riley say. We're going to hit pause. We'll be right back live with more of the opening statements after this. What a fight this is going to be. Prosecutors coming out swinging in the case against defendant Jose Ibarra, the man here in the United States illegally who's accused of murdering Georgia University nursing student Laken Riley. She was 22 years old, out on a jog, and the state is saying that this guy was hunting for females that morning.
What do you guys think so far based on what you've heard so far? I mean, because many trials are like this. These opening statements tell you everything about the crime. I mean, listening to that 911 call, it sounded like you could hear somebody banging on something. Tell me what y'all think.
They allegedly beat her so badly with a rock that he disfigured her skull. Let's go back in now for more of the State's Open.
Mates, and you'll meet all three of them: Lily Steiner, Sophia Magana, and Connolly Huff. All three of them are University of Georgia students at the time. They were all seniors. And Laken herself was at UGA, but had recently transferred to the University of Augusta Athens campus because she wanted to be a nurse. But the four of them still live together. And the roommates are all, I would say, technologically savvy and security savvy. And they all four had iPhones. And there's a function with an iPhone called Find My iPhone, which you can share your location with other people. And the four ladies in that house, roommates, shared their digital location with one another 24/7. And so when Allison Phillips, Laken's mom, began calling and looking for Laken, she notified all the roommates. And then the roommates started checking the Ring door camera, checking for Laken, texting Laken, calling Laken, and no response. I will say that this particular day, February 22nd, 24, happened to be the day where there was a widespread phone outage by AT&T. And so some of the girls did have AT&T as their service provider. Laken is Verizon. And so the girls were having phone problems due to that widespread outage. And so you'll hear about how that kind of interfered with their ability to really find where she was. But eventually, they could not find her. They could not find her for hours. And even though Laken would go out on long runs, she always had her phone with her, so they became concerned. So at around 11:30 on the day of her murder, two roommates, Sophia and Lily, went and walked the trails behind the intramural fields of the Georgia where Laken used to run, but they also had her digital profile. And her digital profile put her in the middle of the Oconee forest, and they had noticed that she had not moved. She had not moved for hours. And so they walked to where they could last see her digital profile, and the two roommates found one of Laken's AirPods. They photographed it, they collected it, they went back to their house where they could have Wi-Fi to because they had no phone service in the forest and an outage was on. And at 12:05 p.m., they called the University of Georgia police and reported that Laken Riley was missing. So it isn't until the police respond immediately. And they take that digital profile, and you'll meet Sergeant Maxwell. He is the officer that found Laken's body. And it takes him, even with her digital profile, this is a very forested area. And she obviously wasn't on the running trail. She was off the running trail. And it took him about 25 minutes, even with her digital profile, for him to locate her. And he did locate her. And you're going to see the body cam footage of him locating her. And what he found when he found her is that she was hidden kind of almost under a tree and covered up with a bunch of leaves. The first thing he noticed was that her breasts were completely exposed. All three layers of her top clothing were pulled up above and around her neck. He also noticed that her running tights, which she typically wears above her navel, were pulled down and her underwear was protruding from her tights. He also noticed severe injuries to the left side of her head. He began immediately trying to save her life, but he could tell that she was dead. She was cold. But he began CPR, and you will see the efforts of him and several other University of Georgia police officers where they try to save her. They have to move her out of this area so that they can get her flat on the ground. They give her chest compressions. They give her CPR. They put those pads on her chest to try to start her heart. Eventually, the fire department and EMS comes and they do the same. They work her for several minutes, but she is dead. She is dead. And there was nothing they could do to stop it or help her. You'll see the crime scene measurements. The crime scene in this case was worked by the GBI in conjunction with UGA-PD. You will hear in this case from GBI, UGA-PD, FBI, and ACC-PD. Four of them really in conjunction worked this case. And the crime scene, importantly, when they get there, there's really a few items there. But item number one, where you see on the trail, is the other AirPod that Laken was wearing at the time that she was running. And then they saw a disturbed area of leaves to a point where they found two rocks in a tree, both of whom have, or all three of which have Laken's blood on them. And then Laken's body was a few feet away from that, where you see the green there. And then her phone was not found near her body. It was found where you see item number 8, which is the other tree that you see there. But her person was taken 64 feet off that trail. So from where AirPod is, item number 1, to where you see items 2, 3, and 4 is 65 feet. So in legal terms, he aspirated her 64 feet off of that trail so that he could attempt to victimize her. This is the crime scene, and you'll see how wooded it is and why it took Sergeant Maxwell so long to find her, even though he did have her digital profile. And in here, this photo is actually the phone. And so it took them a really long time to find the phone. They were calling the phone, they were pinging the phone. Her phone was on silent, so they couldn't hear it. I mean, it wasn't until it got dark that they could find her phone, but they kept looking for her phone because they knew the phone was there. And they found it. And when they found it, this is what Daniela Stewart of the GBI saw on her iPhone, exactly where your thumb would be if you go to hang up the call on the iPhone. So at the bottom of the iPhone.
This is a horrific story this prosecutor is telling, doing a tremendous job with the advocacy work for this judge here. Let's hit a break. When we come back, we'll go back in. There's more. The state's not done. And this is just the opening statements in the case over the murder of Laken Riley.
What?
You know, it's interesting how, it's so easy to get angry at the perpetrator. And you know how I typed in the chat, this guy is trash. But I've seen other videos where evidence is shown against him that's more compelling than what's already been shown. So he is, I don't know, man. I guess that's why it infuriates me when people discuss the justice system as if everybody who goes on trial is innocent. Everybody who goes on trial has not committed a crime. I mean, and you can't change people's perception of that. You can't. Presumption of innocence before guilt or innocence phase. I mean, I understand that. But you're telling me if this was your daughter, you could sit there and be like, oh, this guy's innocent until his peers find him guilty. You're that formal about it. When did we become unable to speak our truth and stand behind it instead of asking so many questions regarding what happened, which was somebody died on this trail, point blank, at the hands of someone who hunted her down. I don't want to know about his mental health. I don't want to know about his depression or his anxiety or any of that. I don't want to know any about that. I want to know that the evidence that they have is solid enough to convict him. That's what I want to know. Nothing else matters. He had no concept of human life. 22 years old, she was barely starting her life, just like some other kids we know.
Back to court we go. We're in Georgia in the trial over the murder of nursing student Laken Riley. Let's go back in.
She found this latent print in blood. They processed the phone immediately, and that latent print was sent to ACCPD. And we'll talk about that a little later. And here's some of the Garmin data. And there are some things that we will never know about exactly what happened between Jose Ibarra and Laken Riley on that trail, but we know enough. And what we know is that at 9:10 a.m. from her Garmin that she was wearing, as she is trucking along and she is clipping 7-minute miles, she's running, doing her thing, listening to music, something happens. He does something to her to make her stop dead in her tracks. She initiates the SOS function on her phone and calls 911, and she immediately stops. And after that, you'll see some of this Garmin data, her movement, because it went to the FBI CAS team. They're the ones that analyzed it. You'll hear about it. She's on this trail with this defendant for about 4 minutes. And then you see 4 minutes later, her Garmin move 65 feet into the woods. And there's some additional movement of her along that time. And her heart rate is still going until 9:28 a.m. Her encounter with him was long. Her fight with him was fierce. And that is what the Garmin data shows. And once her heart stops at 9:28 a.m., there's no more movement from her Garmin. So what happens next? Well, UGA PD leave, and they really got nothing other than a peeping Tom incident that had occurred on campus at 7:57 a.m. And I'm going to talk to you about that one last. So what they do is, it is a combination of good police work and luck, pure luck. But they start dumpster diving. ACCPD is dumpster diving, UGA PD is dumpster diving, GBI is dumpster diving, FBI is dumpster diving. Everybody is just looking into every dumpster in the Athens area for anything, because they had nothing. And at a dumpster, at an apartment complex where he lived, a police officer named Zach Davis of ACCPD finds this hoodie jacket. And when he looks in and sees it, it's in a recycling bin, and it's standing out because it's right on top. And he noticed it had long, dark hair on it, wrapped around one of the buttons, and he could see blood. And he thought that was suspicious. So he calls UGA PD. They respond at 9 o'clock on the day of Laken's murder. They collect the jacket found in the dumpster, and they send it immediately to the GBI Crime Lab indicator for testing. But while they're there, They notice, they look around and see that one of the residents in this apartment and B32 had what's called a Eufy camera, which is like a Ring camera that works a little different, had a camera aimed at that dumpster. And so they asked the resident that night, hey, can we come in? Can we see your camera? He agreed to let them see it. And this is what they saw. At 9:44 in the morning, about 15 minutes after Laken Riley's heart stopped, this is what they see.
This pause here, I'm going to bring in our guest analysts who are watching along, Jennifer Coffinduffer and Joe Tamburino. Jen, I want to go to you. What's your reaction to the state's open, please?
Well, first, I do want to say it's so well organized. What a great job with the graphics. What a great job inserting video. This lays out the case so well and so easily to understand. Second, I want to say it's just sickening, right? I mean, how can you watch this and not wonder how in the world the death penalty was removed from the table in this case? I just, bleed for Laken Riley, but I'm so grateful that she fought, and it was her fight that likely led to the arrest of Jose Ibarra.
Right, Jen. She fought for her life, as the prosecutor noted here. We're getting new information that they say it was a rock that they claim he used, that he beat her so badly he disfigured her skull. Joe Tamburino, this evidence, this prosecutor has a lot to work with here. There's a mountain of evidence against this guy. What so far has been the most compelling thing this prosecutor has pointed to for you, and why, please?
Two things, the DNA under the fingernail as well as the thumbprint on the cell phone. We talked about this in the last hour. Why is he doing the bench trial? Like I said, probably because his case is a loser for him. The evidence is overwhelming. He will be convicted by this judge. And what's so sickening about it is, obviously, this is just a terrible, terrible crime. There's no doubt about that. But what's just maddening and sickening about it is he shouldn't even have been here. He crossed the border illegally. He was let go by ICE. He was arrested in New York. They let him go. And now this poor woman is dead. It's just maddening.
It really is, Joe. You're absolutely right. And how about the heartache for her mother? I mean, so we know that Laken Riley was trying to call for help. She stopped from calling help and for help. And we know that her mom was on the phone with her. They would talk when she would jog. And poor mom doesn't know what in the world is going on. Jen, what did you think when you heard that?
I mean, I can just picture her there, realizing she has her phone in reach, pressing that button, likely after she thought it was over. And then him realizing and grabbing it and tossing it. I can just picture this whole thing play out. And I was exactly thinking about what you said, what the mother and father and her loved ones must be thinking as they're listening to this trauma play out. It just doesn't get any worse than a crime like this.
No, it really doesn't. Excellent analysis from you both, as always. We've got to hit a break. Jennifer Coffinduffer, Joe Tamburino, thank you both so much. We're going to hit pause on this opening statement. You're going to hear more of it in just 4 minutes. We're going back in Georgia live for the trial of murder defendant Jose Ibarra. And we're remembering the victim this morning here on Court TV, victim Laken Riley. This message is for...
This is over an hour long. I'm going to go ahead and cut it right there. Or I'll play a little bit more. But I'm not going to play the whole thing. I'll do the second part probably later on today. But this is so sad. Can you imagine how many people there are that wake up early and just want to go for a run to clear their head, to be physically fit, to lower blood pressure, things like that. As if we don't have enough to worry about. Now you have to worry about people jumping out at you on the trail. I mean, he went and tried to get into a woman's apartment 10 times, looking in the window, before he went in and found Laken on the trail. You know, it's just heartbreaking. But what's more heartbreaking is people line up to defend a person who shouldn't have even been here, you know, because he wasn't legal. He had a detainer, but he was free to just be over here and do as he wished, to kill a person who was here legally, doing what her legal right was, to work out on a trail without being harmed. And you know, it saddens me a little bit because we got women on these platforms. They're creators. And they act like women don't have it bad already. You know, you heard in other cases, it could have been what they were wearing that drew attention to them, so therefore that led to their murder. You know, that is such a sexist remark. It is so time capsule worthy. This woman was working out in tight fitting clothes, trying to be comfortable as she was running. I'm sure she wasn't thinking about fashion. She wasn't thinking about, you know, turning somebody into a raging, hormone-driven individual. But yet, it's always the victim to get blamed for their behavior. I don't get it. I don't get it. Many people talk about justice, but yet at the same time, they're victim shaming, family shaming. In this case, I'm so glad they didn't go after her mother. I mean, hell, you haven't really heard a lot about this case on YouTube because people are so busy trying to diagnose these other cases that they believe the person is innocent. At one point in this world, we're going to have to open our eyes and believe that evil does happen. And it does happen quickly, and it does happen without a reason, and it does happen by the nice looking person, by the person that looks just like us, who act like us, who talk like us. We have to stop going with the stereotype that if it doesn't appear to be scary, then therefore it can't hurt you. You know, and that's the mindset that I see a lot of individuals take when it comes to true crime.
Welcome to our second hour of Court TV Live. I'm Julie Grant. This morning, we're tracking two major trials happening both in Georgia. We've got the defense case underway in the baby cult murder trial of Chloe Driver, the victim, her daughter, baby Hannah. And in Athens, Georgia, just kicking off this morning, the bench trial for Jose Ibarra. That's right, going judge, not jury. He's accused of murdering UGA nursing student Laken Riley. The case capturing the nation's attention, and here we are on day one of trial. Let's go back into the courtroom. The prosecution delivering a fiery opening statement, laying it all out, and this story is nothing short of horrific.
So they saw an individual who they did not know who it was at the time, dump the jacket in the dumpster and go to those bushes there and dump something there. So they go to the bushes, and this video has been enhanced, and I'm sure you're going to hear a lot of testimony about this video, enhanced the best they could by GBI Cyber. And I know the court sat through some motions to suppress where this black Adidas hat, there was a lot of discussion about, and you're going to hear more about all of those things. But this is an image that they locked in on and began to circulate around the neighborhood, or as the cops call a bolo. Be on the lookout for this individual. They didn't know who he was, and they circulated that. But they did go also that night, still the night of February 22nd, to the bushes, and they found 3 black disposable kitchen gloves. And those gloves were also sent immediately to the crime lab. And one of the interesting things about the black disposable gloves when they got to the crime lab and they were analyzed, this is a picture taken at the crime lab, is that on the thumb of the gloves, there was a hole. There's also other holes in the gloves when they found them, but on the thumb area of one of the gloves that the crime lab examined, they found a hole. And they also found blood, and that blood was later to be determined to be Laken Riley's blood on those gloves. So I've already told you about the geographic locations. They're all clustered. You can see in this map, the crime scene is up top in the middle, called body crime scene. The dumpster where the items were found is marked. Building S is right by the bus stop, and then Laken Riley lived further up, Millage Avenue, towards the top of this photo. But the distance between the Building S, which will become important, and Laken Riley's body is about 300 yards. The distance between the dumpster and Laken Riley's body is about 500 yards. And the distance between the dumpster and the bus stop and where the defendant lived, he lived in that apartment complex, is about 150 yards. Everything is close together. So what happened next in the investigation is that the very next morning on Friday, February 23rd at 8:32 a.m. as ACCPD, again, is just looking out for anything. They had the bolo at that point. They encounter a person named Diego Ibarra. And Diego Ibarra is wearing a black Adidas hat that is some interest to them, which is they believe to be the identical hat that they had seen in the video the night before. And I will tell you this, on that hat that Diego Ibarra was wearing the next day is Laken Riley's blood. So their theory that that was in fact the same hat was absolutely correct. So they encounter Diego Ibarra. He gives them a fake green card. They know it's fake because it has 2 different dates of birth on it. And so they ask him to go back to his residence, and they begin talking to him. UGAPD arrives, and they begin to take over the scene. From the information that they had gotten from Diego Ibarra, they knew that hat was a hat seen in the video because of the proximity of the crime. And at some point, Diego began telling them he's got brothers in the house sleeping, and there were many communication difficulties at first because the first responding officers did not speak Spanish. No one in this apartment, D126, could speak English. So at some point, UGA brought 2 of their Spanish-speaking officers on scene, and the communication became a little easier. Officer Bridges, Officer Sand, both of whom are native speakers of Spanish, arrived and began taking over the communications. When they get there, they are attempting to secure the residence for a warrant. And before they could do a security sweep to secure the residence for a warrant, Argenis Ibarra, who's in the middle in this slide, comes out with a garbage bag in his hand. He eventually gives officers consent to enter the residence. And when Sergeant Epps enters the residence, he sees Jose Ibarra asleep in the bed. And that is how he identified in this case. You will see there are 5 residents that lived in apartment D126. Jose Antonio Ibarra, this defendant, also goes by the name of Victor, which will be important because a lot of the communications within his phone and some of the witnesses just call him Victor. So Jose Ibarra is Victor. It is in fact the same person. Diego Ibarra is Jose's older brother, goes by the name of El Gocho, is a nickname that Many people, including this defendant, call him El Gocho. Argenis goes by Manny, and Rosbelli Flores Bello goes by La Gorda, and then Juan Carlos Diaz Hernandez, they call Carlito. And I suspect the state will tell you right now, you're going to hear from Rosbelli in that residence. You will also hear that all the residents, Diego, Argenis, and Rosbelli, at least those three, are currently in federal custody on some immigration issues. But we are going to produce Rosbelli to testify to the court about the things that she saw and observed that day. And it is Rosbelli who identifies Jose Ibarra from the dumpster video. The officers, when they saw Jose Ibarra that day, saw that he had many injuries to him. Scratches on his arm, scratches on his wrist, scratches on the back of his neck, scratches on his hand. And they photographed those injuries to him. And then they began to do an additional canvass of this entire apartment complex. There are multiple buildings in this apartment complex, A, B, C, D, and E. Multiple teams of agents began going around looking for cameras, talking to residents. What do they know? What do they not know? And one of the things that they found is that the Ibarras lived at D126. Right next to them is D125, and right next to D125 is D124. 124 had a ring camera. 125 had a still camera. And they went and collected videos from those two apartments. And importantly, on the day that Laken Riley was murdered, at 10:21 a.m., Jose Ibarra is captured on D124 coming out of his apartment with a bag, and now his clothes have changed. He's wearing different clothes than he was wearing about 40 minutes ago. And he has a bag in his hand, and he's walking towards a dumpster, another dumpster in their apartment complex. And that dumpster, by the way, had been emptied the day of the murder. So when the officers went to check that dumpster had nothing in it for them. But in the next door neighbors, still camera shot at 10:24 a.m., 3 minutes later, Jose Ibarra is walking back towards his apartment, empty-handed, nothing in his hand. So they searched the residence that day, and they found a few things of significance. Number one, they found 3 more black disposable kitchen gloves, which were sent to trace evidence for plastics and polymer examination, and they concluded that they had originated from the same source as the gloves that were recovered in the bushes. They recovered 2 of the defendant's Samsung cell phones, which you will hear some evidence out of, but they also found no bloody clothing, no bloody anything, and the shirt and the satchel that you see the defendant wearing in the video, the dumpster video, were never found. They're not in that residence.
So I'm going to stop right there. So let me ask you a question, because this is the thinking of a lot of people as well. She did mention right there, no blood or no bloody clothing. So that instantly means he didn't do it? Or does that mean that he possibly could have got rid of the stuff? Well, I hope you enjoyed that this morning. I really didn't have a plan to show any of this, but I will continue later on. I have some schoolwork to do, and, priorities come first. But I hope you enjoyed this. Leave a comment. Leave a chat. Can you dig it? Can you dig it? If you can't dig it, get yourself a bigger shovel. Maestro, cue that music.